I'm Cynthia Diane Haney here in my Tye River, Virginia, USA workshop. I'm a spinner, knitter, crochet, and I sew. I started spinning after going to some local fiber festivals where I saw a demonstration on using a drop spindle, bought some fiber, came home, assembled a little toy wheel spindle, practiced spinning, and made it to the aha moment, also realizing I needed a different spindle. I fortunately have grown up with a wood shop here in the house because my father is a cabinet maker turned artist full-time, and I swiped his lathe, the books for using it, got permission, and turned the spindle that I had in my head. The idea was able to get it to flow through my hands onto the lathe and make a spindle I loved. It spun like a dream. It was pretty. It was rim weighted, and took it to the local spinning group where the ladies loved it too and wanted me to make them some. Next thing I know, I'm making spindles full time, and I've named my business Cynthia Wood Spinner because I'm Cynthia. The wood spins on the lathe as I'm turning it, and then the wood spins in the tool as I'm spinning yarn. So Cynthia Wood Spinner is my name for the website, business, and all my media. Other tools I make include crochet hooks, sizes E to U. I hand turn wooden yarn bowls with a smooth carved yarn notch. Dizzes for preparing your fiber, and some are sets with a matching threading tool. Nitty knotties so you can make your skein of yarn. I have a 2-yard size, an 18-inch size, and a mini 12-inch size, being the length of the skein with a comfortable handle so you can hang on to it as you wind. Wrap per inch tools for measuring your yarn, and Nostipine to be able to wind that center pole ball of yarn and use it. More information on these tools at cynthiawoodspinner.com. Spindles are my main love, mainly top whorl drop spindles, in that the whorl is at the top of the spindle shaft and it hangs from the yarn as you're making it, getting closer and closer to the floor. Some of my spindles I make as sets with a matching display stand. I marked this board and sawed it so that the whorl and the stand were next to each other before I turned them, and then when the spindle is sitting in the stand you get that pretty effect. This is black walnut with a little patch of sapwood giving all that interest, and then I put it on a curly ash shaft to get the iridescence of the grain on the spindle shaft. I'm very particular picking the best, prettiest bits of each board to be able to bring a beautiful spindle that'll function well with a deeply hollowed rim weighted shape on most of my tools. I shape the shaft as one piece. It's continuous through the whorl, and I give it a little decoration at the top. All my hooks are hammered after I've bent them from wire, and I polish them. This is bronze for a nice, pretty jewelry-like hook. And all my whorls have a notch at the back of the whorl to better guide the yarn to the hook. I sort the spindles into 3 sizes. I have my twig size, small, lightweight, great for spinning, super thin lace yarn. Not for the beginner, but wonderful once you've gotten a little practice. My branch size, which ranges wildly in weight and shaft length, but it covers most medium yarn thicknesses, anything from fingering on into a thick worsted you can easily spin on a branch. And again, I take great care in my grain. This happens to be another one of my spectacular sets in that it's spectacularly pretty instead of a classic beauty. And I used curly ash again on the shaft of this. The whorls and the display stand are tulip poplar, and this is a trunk size, my biggest size, great for spinning thick yarn and particularly for doing most of my plying. This is the same size as that first spindle I ever made, in that it's larger and has more momentum due to its weight to be able to spin a beautiful yarn. I buy all my materials as kiln-dried wood from a lumber yard, getting them in board form like this piece of cherry. The first stop when I make it home to the workshop is I put the board on the counter of my radial arm saw to cross-cut it to length based on what purposes I have for it. Then it takes a trip over the joiner to smooth one face and one edge and get them square to each other, making it safe to take it to the table saw, where I select the grain that's the straightest and cut it off into sticks that will eventually become spindles. Other parts of it where the grain is more interesting and not as straight, I take over to the bandsaw where I rough cut it into circles that can become whorls or stands for spindles. After all that sawing, I get circles like this that will become the whorl, but I always turn shafts first, and this is the blank for the shaft from that cherry board. First, I rough it out with a roughing gouge, getting it round and close to the correct diameter. Then I switch to the parting tool briefly and size the very end of the shaft, followed by a spindle gouge of a small size to shape my pretty decorative shape at the top of the shaft. Then I switch over to my main tool, the skew chisel, which is where I do all the sizing, shaping, and smoothing of the shaft. And that happens while I have my left hand curled around or supporting from below the shaft and my thumb resting on the chisel as it's then powered by my right hand. And that resting hand controls vibration again, meaning that the wood is supported at the exact spot where the chisel's contacting it to reduce chatter. Otherwise, that shaft tries to act like a slingshot and really vibrates all over the place, needless to say, making it difficult to turn a straight round shaft. After all that turning, I switch to sanding, progressing through grits to a very fine state, making certain that I don't have any scratch marks or any stray tool marks, and making certain, stopping and checking with my calipers, that the shaft is the correct size for the hole I will be putting in the whorl, the only measuring that happens in spindles while they're being made. After the shaft's been turned, I then reset up the lathe, which is why I make my spindles in batches of 8, so I don't have to set it up so often, and put a different chuck jaws on the lathe, a different hood for collecting the dust, which is that lavender box, and switch up how the tool rest is supported to be, that's the metal bar under the tool, so that then I can use my bowl gouges to turn that round circle into the whorl, hollowing it, flattening the bottom, and then yet another gripping of it on the lathe to get the edges shaped to my satisfaction. Once it's left the lathe, the shaft has to have both the top and the bottom tip sanded smooth because I have to saw off the scrap that was holding it. I glue together the shaft and whorl permanently, followed by notching, carving a notch there in the side of the spindle whorl while I hold it in my vise. Then I make my hooks at that stage and drill the hole in the tip of the spindle shaft with a skinny wire gauge bit to fit the wire of the hook. And once that hook is polished and glued into the spindle shaft, the hook being the only replaceable part of my spindles, so it gets a special glue that I could replace it if need be. My perfectionism must be satisfied, otherwise I rub out the varnish and varnish it again till I get that nice smooth finish. I test spin all my spindles to make certain that they pass my I love how it spins standard before I sell them. Each spindle is already extremely carefully balanced, but part of the test spinning is getting the hook tuned in perfect alignment. And if a spinner ever smooshes their spindle in a bag badly and bends the hook out of alignment, they can always contact me for some help getting it realigned so that it spins nice and steady and smooth and no unnecessary vibration until it gives you that warning wobble it'll eventually give you when it slows down to stop. I make sure that rim weighted whorl gives you that good long spin time. And in my listings of spindles, I describe how it spins. I'll talk about it being long. And if it's, say, a branch size classic beauty like this cherry spindle that's rim weighted and in a good weight range, I will call it beginner friendly and have a whole section just for those spindles on my website that really will be easy for a beginner. But I also use those adjectives of long or fast, sometimes slow, or a mid of a long and fast sort of, or long and moderately fast sort of descriptions in the additional information on each spindle, just to give you as much information as I can about them. The best thing though is to learn how to spin and get your hands on. I have how-to information on my website, Facebook, and YouTube, all under Cynthia Wood Spinner. And I teach classes on beginning spinning, transitioning to the spindle from the spinning wheel for those that already know how to make yarn but have not gotten the hang of the spindle. And I have a class on how to choose the best spindle for your spinning project, so you learn which spindle size, style, and weight you need to go with a particular fiber to make your yarn. And I teach all my classes at festivals and fiber guilds. Please reach out if you want to take a class. Thank you for letting me share my shop with you.